Welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight, 3 weeks out, and the trend lines are certainly freaking out the left. Headlines everywhere that Trump is surging, Kamala is falling. The Real Clear Politics average of polls at this point in 2020 had Joe Biden up nearly 10 points before he barely eked out a win. In 2016, that same poll, or collection of polls, had Hillary up nearly 7 points before she lost. And right now, this same average of polls shows a nearly neck-and-neck race, Kamala up 1.7 points. Do the math. The corporate media certainly has. Meet the Press on Sunday was pure propaganda as they all freak out over what is likely coming, hopefully coming. It was all centered around NBC's latest poll, where the network cleverly found a way to ask a question that made abortion somehow the most important topic in America in this election. They figured out how to do this. It's a brilliant scheme. I'll give them that. Steve Kornacki even admits on Meet the Press to the unusual tactic that NBC used to get the polling answer to that question that they so desired. Take a listen.
This is an interesting way. Typically in the past, we've just given folks a list of issues, said, are they important? Here we've asked a question, is this issue so singularly important that it's the entire basis of your vote for president? And you could see abortion comes in number one there.
And that's so significant. This is the first presidential election after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Hugely significant. Abortion is at the top. Usually we're talking about the cost of living as being the energizing factor.
Abortion is 6 points higher than cost of living. You got a whole country full of people moonlighting in second jobs so that they can make their rent. And somehow they figured out a way to get abortion to the top of the list. Right. And you listen to how excited Kristen Welker was to report that, too, indoctrinating a massive audience into believing that abortion, Kamala's strongest issue, is the most critical issue in America today. You can't make it up. Big media facing doomsday, going to do anything they can to drag Kamala across the finish line. The show and Welker then brought on Speaker Mike Johnson right after that and just hammered him with questions. Nothing but questions, nothing else but questions designed to ignite a broad fear of Trump. And for every answer that the House Speaker gave, there was a retaliation that was either false or only true by way of meaningless journalistic semantics. Take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, all of those claims have been debunked. If former President Trump is so confident in his policies, yes, they haven't. Mr. Speaker, we should note that FEMA funds were actually redirected on Donald Trump's watch to deal with the migrant issue. Let me ask you, you mentioned the medical records.
No, ma'am. No, wait a minute. No, that's hold on, wait a minute. Wait, facts are important.
Mr. Speaker,
that's what people are going to vote on.
Just to be very clear, he hasn't released all of his medical records. He released 2 letters. Should he release the results of the cognitive test?
He's on display every minute.
He didn't release his medical records. You don't want to know things like his cholesterol level, whether he's dealing with any issue that we may not know about, if he's going to be commander-in-chief. And he also said he would release cognitive tests.
Listen to your question.
Listen to how ridiculous these interviews are. And where the hell was her questions about Joe Biden for the last 3 years? About his cognitive abilities as he basically was completely gone. And yet somehow Republicans continue appearing on these shows. For some reason, they keep going on these shows. As soon as Mike Johnson wrapped up, there was a nice, long, friendly chat between Welker and Liz Cheney, where multiple outrageous claims, including that Trump personally sent rioters to the Capitol to attack cops, those claims were just ignored. Welker just nodding along. Yeah, you're right. Over at ABC News, more of the same. Martha Raddatz bringing on J.D. Vance and lambasting Trump for his exaggerations about migrant gangs taking over Aurora, Colorado. This is one of the best moments we've seen in a long time between a Republican and the media that so despises the Republican Party.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs.
Yeah. That's the experience with the media for the last 10 years. Vance hits the nail right on the head. They are so ideologically warped that they will defend this chaos that's been created in your country. They'll defend it until they die. It's the political equivalency of the sunken cost fallacy. They cannot abandon this warped ideology. They've been with it so long. And as it gets worse and worse and worse, they just hold on to it. As they destroy the country, they just hold on to it because how do you flip now? You've stuck with it for so long. As the party just decimates the country, you have to still defend it. For 3 years, we have seen just how disinterested the media and largely has been in covering this unforgivable Democrat-led migrant invasion. They only perk up when there's a claim that they think that they can marginally debunk. That's the only time you hear them talk about these issues, is when there's something they think they can debunk to make people think everything's okay. They're not eating dogs and cats, you freak. Just the ducks from the local pond, but not the dogs and cats. It's only a handful of apartment complexes in a Colorado suburb taken over by psychopathic South American gangs armed with semi-automatic weapons. It's not the whole town. It's just like 5 massive apartment complexes. This is what we're dealing with. The top story from the New York Post today, Tren de Aragua gang members as young as 11 are terrorizing Times Square, robbing tourists at gunpoint. Can you imagine if a little Hispanic kid, 11 years old, walked up to you with a gun on 42nd Street in Manhattan and said, "Give me your wallet"? That's the reality that they've created. This is what they're trying to ignore and get into power so that they can continue doing. You don't deserve to get reelected after you do this to a country. You don't deserve it. And the reality is setting in for the left and for their media. Mika on Morning Joe today, almost crying, begging Kamala's dwindling base of support to vote to save this destructive, disconnected, idiotic regime.
It's actually you, the American voter, who needs to step up. Truly look at the choice before us. Listen to Donald Trump's speeches. Truth over lies, democracy versus fascism, or something like that looks like it. Your interests rather than revenge for Donald Trump's ego. The rule of law versus Donald Trump's lawlessness. Kindness versus cruelty. If you are concerned about those things and are worried Harris could very well lose, well, do something. Get to work.
The millionaire, blue state millionaire that doesn't have to deal with any of this because when the migrants come into her neighborhood, they kick them out with a smile. Surrounded by bad news, Mika begs in tears for help. It's an example of why in Pennsylvania, right here, this is why they're so worried. A state that Biden carried by 80,000 votes in 2020, Democrats have lost 300,000 registered voters over the last 4 years. Republicans have gained 70,000. That's a swing of 370,000 in voter registration against the Democrat Party. And again, Biden won that state by 80,000 when they played a hell of a lot of tricks in 2020 to help him win that state. That is why the panic is so real, and the trend lines don't seem to be changing. And they're waiting for the October surprise, but it's baked in for Trump. They've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at this point. Kamala Harris can only get worse. This is why they're freaking out. And on CNN, even more bad news for the left. Take a listen to this.
At this particular hour, if you believe the polling, Donald Trump's going to put up the best performance with black voters since Richard Nixon back in 1960. Not 68, since 1960. That's 64 years ago. Among Hispanic voters, Donald Trump's going to put up the best performance for Republicans since 2004 and George W. Bush.
Think about that. Those are just staggering numbers. The best performance since 1960 with black Americans. Kamala thought she could run as a change agent against her own administration. That was the fatal flaw. Americans might be dumb, but nobody is as dumb as Kamala Harris's campaign. Your paycheck is gutted. Your city is full of third world fake refugees. Your CVS is regularly looted. America is a dump under this regime. And people realize that. We don't have the memory lapses of a fly. We can remember what it was like 5 years ago in this country. And obviously the message is it's time to get serious. It's time to get real. And no amount of Trump fear mongering is going to be able to change that.